My name is Tom Grant, and I used to believe in fairy tales, not the kind with dragons and princesses, but the suburban American dream variety where hard work, loyalty, and a decent mortgage rate could buy you happiness. At 40, I've learned that fairy tales are just lies we tell ourselves, while the real story unfolds in shadows and whispers. I'm a building inspector for the city of Cleveland Heights. Not glamorous, but steady work that pays the bills and keeps food on the table. Before that, I spent 12 years as a firefighter until a warehouse collapse messed up my back enough to force a career change. These days, I check foundations, electrical systems, and structural integrity for a living. The irony isn't lost on me that I couldn't spot the rot in my own home. Natalie, my wife of 16 years, works as an HR manager at TechFlow Solutions, one of those gleaming new companies that moved into our Rust Belt city, promising to revitalize the economy. She's 36, sharp as a razor, and has always been more ambitious than me. I used to admire that about her. Used to admire a lot of things about her. Our daughter Zoe is 15, caught in that awkward space between childhood and whatever comes next. She's got her mother's brains and, unfortunately, has started inheriting her talent for keeping secrets. The first crack appeared 3 months ago, though I didn't recognize it then. Natalie started working late more often, coming home after dinner with apologies about quarterly reports and employee evaluations. She'd heat up leftovers in the microwave while scrolling through her phone, offering distracted responses to my questions about her day. "How was the Henderson audit?" I'd ask. "Fine," she'd reply, not looking up from her screen. "Did Morrison approve the new vacation policy?" Conversations became transactions, information exchanged with the efficiency of a business meeting. I told myself it was temporary stress, that things would return to normal once her department finished whatever project was consuming her attention. Then came the gym membership. Natalie announced she'd joined FitLife Premium, the expensive place downtown with the juice bar and personal trainers who looked like they belonged in magazines. She'd never shown interest in working out before, claiming she got enough exercise walking around the office and chasing after Zoe's school activities. "I need to take better care of myself," she explained, modeling her new workout clothes in our bedroom mirror. "Sitting at a desk all day is terrible for your health." The outfits were designer brands I'd never heard of, but could tell were pricey. Sports bras that cost more than my work boots. Yoga pants that probably required their own insurance policy. She'd leave for the gym at 7 in the evening and return around 10, showered and glowing with what she claimed was post-workout endorphins. I started doing my own laundry around that time. Not out of suspicion, just practicality. Natalie was always too busy or too tired to keep up with household chores, and I'd rather wash my own shirts than wear wrinkled ones to work. That's how I found the phone. It was a Tuesday evening in October. Natalie was at her book club, or so she'd said. I was sorting through the hamper when my fingers brushed against something hard wrapped in one of her blouses. A second iPhone, identical to the one she carried openly, tucked away like a guilty secret. My hands shook as I powered it on. No passcode, which seemed careless for someone who worked in HR and preached about data security. The message history made my stomach clench. Dozens of texts between Natalie and someone listed as D in her contacts. "Can't wait to see you tonight." That hotel suite was incredible. "Tom suspects nothing." "When are you leaving him?" I sat on the bathroom floor, scrolling through months of messages that painted a picture of my marriage I didn't recognize. My wife, the woman who reminded me to take my vitamins and complained about our grocery budget, was planning a new life with someone else. Someone who could afford hotel suites and apparently had enough influence to make her believe leaving me was not just possible, but inevitable. The phone buzzed in my hands. A new message from D. "Dinner tomorrow? The usual place?" Natalie's response came quickly. "Perfect. I'll tell Tom I'm working late again." I powered off the phone and wrapped it back in the blouse, exactly as I'd found it. My reflection in the bathroom mirror looked like a stranger. Same brown hair going gray at the temples, same tired eyes, same face that had kissed Natalie goodbye that morning without knowing it might be one of the last genuine moments between us. Sleep didn't come that night. I lay beside my wife, listening to her breathe, wondering how long she'd been living this double life. When had I become the obstacle to her happiness instead of its foundation? When had our home become a prison she needed to escape? The next evening I followed her. Natalie left at 6:30, claiming she had to finish a presentation for the morning meeting. I waited 10 minutes, then drove downtown to TechFlow's office building. Her car wasn't in the parking lot. I circled the block twice, checking nearby restaurants and coffee shops, but found nothing. On impulse, I drove to the Marriott downtown. Natalie's silver Honda sat in the hotel parking garage, tucked between a Mercedes and a BMW like it belonged there. I parked across the street and waited, feeling like a private investigator in a bad movie. At 9:15, Natalie emerged from the hotel entrance with a man I recognized from her company Christmas party. David Kessler, her boss. Mid-40s, expensive suit, the kind of confident smile that came from never having to check price tags. He walked her to her car with his hand on the small of her back, a gesture too intimate for colleagues, too familiar for friends. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. They kissed before she got in her car. Not a friendly peck, but the kind of kiss that spoke of practice, of comfort, of a relationship that had moved far beyond whatever professional boundaries had once existed between them. I drove home in a daze, arriving before Natalie. When she walked through the door at 10 o'clock, I was sitting at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee and a stack of building inspection reports. "How was work?" I asked. "Exhausting," she replied, not meeting my eyes. "That presentation took forever to get right." "I'm sure David appreciated your dedication." She paused, her hand frozen on the refrigerator door handle. "What do you mean?" "Just that it's nice to have a boss who values hard work." "Right, yes. He's very supportive." She grabbed a bottle of water and headed upstairs, claiming she needed a shower to wash off the stress of the day. I listened to the water run and wondered what else she was trying to wash away. 3 weeks of careful planning led me to Riverside Steakhouse on a Friday night in November. I'd spent those weeks gathering evidence, not through dramatic confrontations or hired private investigators, but through the mundane detective work of a suspicious husband paying attention to details. Pete Morrison, my old firefighting buddy who'd become a private investigator after his own messy divorce, helped me understand the legal landscape. We met for coffee every Tuesday, ostensibly to catch up, actually to discuss strategy. "Don't do anything stupid," Pete warned during our third meeting. "No breaking and entering, no hacking, no dramatic confrontations that'll make you look like the bad guy in divorce court." "I'm not planning to do anything illegal." "Good. Stick to what you can prove, document everything, and remember that the goal is protecting yourself and Zoe, not getting revenge." Pete was wrong about that last part, but I didn't correct him. The breakthrough came through Zoe's iPhone. She'd been acting strange lately, distant and secretive in a way that went beyond typical teenage behavior. I'd assumed it was normal adolescent rebellion until I realized Natalie had been coaching her. One evening, while Zoe was doing homework at the kitchen table, her phone buzzed with an airdrop notification. She'd accidentally left her settings open to receive files from anyone nearby. The notification showed a preview of what someone was trying to send her, a photo that definitely wasn't meant for a 15-year-old's eyes. "Zoe, you might want to decline that," I said, glancing at her screen. Her face went red. "Oh, gross, that's so embarrassing. Mom must have tried to airdrop something to her own phone and hit mine by mistake." The photo disappeared as she declined it, but not before I'd seen enough to understand what kind of pictures my wife was sharing with her boss. More importantly, I'd learned that Natalie was careless with technology when she was distracted. Over the next week, I quietly helped myself to the digital breadcrumbs Natalie left behind. Email confirmations for hotel reservations, credit card statements showing charges at restaurants she'd never mentioned, a paper trail of deception that painted a clear picture of a woman planning her exit strategy. The most damaging evidence came from Natalie's laptop, which she'd left open on the kitchen counter, while rushing to get ready for another late work meeting. Her email was still logged in, including a folder marked personal that contained months of correspondence with David about their future together. They weren't just having an affair. They were planning a life together, complete with discussions about David leaving his wife, Natalie divorcing me, and the two of them starting fresh somewhere new. David had even researched job opportunities in other cities, places where they could begin again, without the complications of their current situation. The emails revealed something else. David was married to Lisa Kessler, a corporate attorney who specialized in employment law. According to Natalie's messages, Lisa was cold and calculating, but had no idea about the affair. David described his wife as more interested in her career than our marriage, which struck me as ironic coming from a man cheating on her with his subordinate. That's when I decided on the dinner trap. I called Riverside Steakhouse and made a reservation for Friday night at 8 o'clock. Table for 4 under the name Grant. Then I did something that would have made Pete proud of my restraint and horrified by my audacity. I called Lisa Kessler's office. Mrs. Kessler, this is Tom Grant. I believe our spouses work together at TechFlow Solutions. I'm sorry. Do we know each other? Not yet, but I think we should meet. I have some information about David and my wife that I believe you'll find interesting. The silence stretched long enough that I wondered if she'd hung up. What kind of information? The kind that's better discussed in person. Are you free for dinner Friday night? Lisa Kessler agreed to meet me at Riverside Steakhouse at 8 o'clock. She didn't ask for details, which told me she already suspected something was wrong in her marriage. I spent the rest of the week preparing for what would either be the most satisfying evening of my life or the beginning of my complete social destruction. Friday arrived with the kind of cold November rain that made everything look gray and miserable. Perfect weather for ending a marriage. I arrived at Riverside at 7:30 and positioned myself at the bar where I could watch the entrance. Lisa Kessler walked in at exactly 8 o'clock, and I recognized her immediately from the photos on David's office desk. Tall, blonde, wearing a black business suit that probably cost more than my monthly salary. She moved with the confidence of someone accustomed to being the smartest person in the room. "Tom Grant?" she asked, approaching the bar. "That's me. Thank you for coming. Before we sit down, I want to know what this is about." I pulled out my phone and showed her one of the photos I'd saved from Natalie's email account. David and Natalie at a restaurant, holding hands across the table, looking at each other with the kind of intimacy that left no room for misinterpretation. Lisa's expression didn't change, but her grip tightened on her purse. "How long?" "At least 6 months, probably longer." "And you have proof?" "Enough to end both of our marriages and probably David's career." She studied my face for a long moment. "What do you want?" "Justice. And maybe a little public humiliation." Lisa Kessler smiled for the first time since walking into the restaurant. It wasn't a pleasant smile. "I think we're going to get along just fine, Tom." We were seated at our table when David and Natalie arrived at 8:30. They'd requested a corner booth, probably for privacy, but the hostess had seated them directly in our line of sight. I watched Natalie laugh at something David said, her hand resting on his arm with casual familiarity. They looked happy, relaxed, like two people who'd found exactly what they'd been searching for. That was about to change. "Showtime," I murmured to Lisa. We approached their table with the casual confidence of people who belonged there. David noticed us first, his face cycling through confusion, recognition, and panic in the span of 3 seconds. "David," Lisa said pleasantly. "Fancy meeting you here?" Natalie's fork stopped halfway to her mouth. Tom, what are you doing here? Having dinner with Lisa. You remember Lisa, don't you? David's wife? The silence that followed was the kind that makes restaurant conversations at nearby tables pause. David recovered first, probably because he'd had more practice lying to his wife than Natalie had lying to me. This is awkward, he said with a forced laugh. Natalie and I were just discussing the Morrison account. Over wine and candlelight? Lisa asked. How romantic. I mean, professional. I pulled out a chair and sat down without being invited. Lisa followed my lead. The four of us sat around a table meant for two, close enough to smell each other's cologne and count the beads of sweat forming on David's forehead. I have to admit, I said conversationally, when I found Natalie's second phone, I was curious about who Dee was. Imagine my surprise when I realized it was your husband, Lisa. Natalie's face went white. Tom, you're being ridiculous. Am I? Should I read some of the messages out loud? The one about the hotel suite was particularly creative. David tried to stand. I think there's been a misunderstanding. Lisa grabbed his wrist and pulled him back down. For a corporate attorney, she had a surprisingly strong grip. Sit down, David. Let's hear what Tom has to say. What I had to say filled the next 20 minutes and covered 6 months of documented deception. I laid out the evidence methodically: hotel receipts, restaurant charges, text messages, emails discussing their future together. I showed them photos I'd taken of David's car parked at our house while I was at work, proof that their relationship had moved beyond hotel rooms and into my home. The most damaging revelation came last. David hadn't just been cheating on his wife with Natalie. He'd been using his position at TechFlow to embezzle company funds, skimming money from the employee benefits account to pay for his affair. Natalie, as HR manager, had helped him cover the theft by falsifying records and redirecting audit inquiries. That's not true, Natalie whispered. I slid a folder across the table. Financial records, email confirmations, your own handwriting on expense reports that don't match the company's books. Lisa opened the folder and scanned the contents with professional efficiency. Her expression grew colder with each page. David, she said finally, you're not just an adulterer. You're a thief. Lisa, let me explain. Don't. She stood up, gathering the papers. Tom, thank you for bringing this to my attention. I'll be filing for divorce on Monday morning. I'll also be reporting the embezzlement to TechFlow's board of directors and the district attorney's office. She walked away without looking back, leaving David and Natalie sitting in stunned silence. I stood to follow her, then paused. By the way, Natalie, I've already moved your things to your sister's house. The locks have been changed. You can contact my attorney if you want to discuss custody arrangements for Zoe. Tom, wait. But I was already walking away, leaving my wife and her lover to explain to the restaurant staff why they were crying into their expensive steaks. The restraining order arrived on Tuesday morning, delivered by a sheriff's deputy who looked embarrassed to be serving papers to a city building inspector. Natalie was claiming I'd threatened her and David, that I was unstable and potentially violent. According to the court documents, I was prohibited from coming within 500 feet of my wife, her workplace, or David Kessler. The irony wasn't lost on me. I'd spent my career ensuring buildings were safe and structurally sound, and now I was being portrayed as a danger to the very foundation I'd helped build. Pete Morrison sat across from my kitchen table, reading through the restraining order with the practiced eye of someone who'd seen too many messy divorces. This is standard procedure, he said. She's trying to establish a pattern of threatening behavior for the divorce proceedings. I never threatened anyone. Doesn't matter. The burden of proof for a temporary restraining order is pretty low. She just has to convince a judge that she feels unsafe. I poured myself another cup of coffee and stared out the kitchen window at the house across the street. Mrs. Patterson was walking her dog, the same route she'd taken every morning for the past 8 years. Some routines endured even when everything else fell apart. What's my next move? Pete closed the folder. Legally? You comply with the order, document everything, and let your attorney handle the response. Practically? You stay away from Natalie and her boss, keep your head down, and don't do anything that could be interpreted as harassment or intimidation. And if I wanted to do something that wasn't legal advice, then I'd remind you that I'm a licensed private investigator with a reputation to protect, and this conversation never happened. Pete left at noon, but not before slipping me a business card for Monica Reeves, one of Natalie's book club friends. On the back, he'd written, "She called me," and a phone number. Monica answered on the second ring. "Tom, I was hoping you'd call. Pete said you had something to tell me. Not over the phone. Can you meet me at Starbucks on Cedar Road, the one near the Target?" I found Monica sitting in a corner booth, nervously stirring a latte that had probably gone cold 20 minutes ago. She was younger than Natalie, maybe 32, with the kind of nervous energy that suggested she'd been keeping secrets too long. "I feel terrible about this," she began before I'd even sat down. "About what?" "About knowing. About not telling you. About being part of all of this." Monica had been Natalie's closest friend in the book club, which I now realized was just cover for a group of women who spent more time discussing their personal lives than literature. According to Monica, Natalie had been bragging about her affair for months, describing David as her upgrade and me as the practice husband she'd outgrown. "She said you were boring," Monica continued, unable to meet my eyes. "That you had no ambition, no drive. She called you a small-town firefighter playing dress-up as a building inspector." The words stung more than I'd expected, not because they were true, but because they revealed how completely Natalie had rewritten our history to justify her betrayal. "There's more," Monica said. "She's been coaching Zoe." "Coaching her to do what?" "To lie about you, to say you've been angry and threatening. Natalie promised to buy her a car if she'd testify that you've been acting unstable since you found out about the affair." My hands clenched around my coffee cup. "She's using our daughter as a weapon." "Zoe doesn't want to do it. She's been crying about it for weeks. But Natalie keeps telling her it's temporary, that once the divorce is final, everything will go back to normal." Monica reached into her purse and pulled out her phone. "I recorded our last book club meeting. Natalie was drunk and said some things. Well, you should hear them yourself." She played an audio file of Natalie's voice, slightly slurred but clearly recognizable. "Tom thinks he's so smart, following us around like some pathetic private detective. He has no idea what's coming. David's already talked to his lawyer about getting me a settlement that'll set me up for life. And the best part? Tom's going to pay for it all through alimony and child support while I'm living with David in his house." The recording continued for several minutes, with Natalie describing her plans to take half of everything I owned and move to a different state with David once his divorce was finalized. She laughed about the restraining order, calling it insurance against any attempts I might make to interfere with her new life. "Why are you showing me this?" I asked. Monica finally looked at me directly. "Because you're a good man, Tom. You didn't deserve what she did to you, and because I'm tired of being part of her lies." I left Starbucks with Monica's phone number and a copy of the recording. More importantly, I left with the knowledge that Natalie had underestimated me. She saw me as a small-town firefighter playing dress-up, someone who'd accept defeat and fade quietly into the background of her success story. She was about to learn how wrong she was. David Kessler drove a restored 1967 Mustang Fastback, cherry red with black racing stripes. He parked it in the executive section of TechFlow's parking lot, taking up 2 spaces to prevent door dings. I'd seen him washing and waxing it on weekends, treating the car with more attention than he'd apparently given his marriage. The Mustang represented everything David valued: status, power, the ability to attract attention and admiration. It was his pride and joy, his midlife crisis made manifest in steel and chrome, which is why I felt no guilt about destroying it. I waited until Thursday evening when David and Natalie were at another one of their dinner meetings. The TechFlow parking lot was mostly empty, just a few cars belonging to the cleaning crew and some dedicated employees working late. Security cameras covered the main entrance, but the executive parking area had a blind spot near the dumpsters. I'd brought a gallon of paint stripper and a brush, tools of the trade for someone in building maintenance. Paint stripper was designed to remove layers of coating from surfaces, breaking down the chemical bonds that held color and protection in place. Applied to automotive paint, it would create a chemical reaction that would bubble and peel the finish, leaving permanent damage that would cost thousands to repair. The Mustang sat under a parking lot light like a monument to David's ego. I approached it with the casual confidence of someone who belonged there, just another maintenance worker taking care of business after hours. The paint stripper went on smooth and even, covering the hood, roof, and trunk in a thin layer that immediately began to react with the car's finish. I worked quickly but thoroughly, making sure to get the racing stripes and the custom pinstriping that David was so proud of. By morning, the Mustang would look like it had been attacked by acid rain and neglect. The damage would be permanent, irreversible, and expensive. More importantly, it would be public. Everyone at TechFlow would see David's pride and joy reduced to a chemical-scarred reminder of what happened when you thought you were untouchable. I was walking back to my truck when David's voice echoed across the parking lot. "Hey, what are you doing to my car?" He was running toward me, still wearing his expensive suit from dinner, his face twisted with rage and disbelief. I'd miscalculated his schedule, assumed he'd be occupied with Natalie for at least another hour. "Just doing some maintenance?" I called back, not breaking stride. "That's my car. You're vandalizing my car." David reached the Mustang and saw the paint stripper already beginning to bubble the finish. His scream of rage could probably be heard 3 blocks away. I was almost to my truck when he caught up with me. David grabbed my shoulder and spun me around, his face red with fury. "You psychopath! Do you have any idea how much that car is worth?" "About as much as my marriage was worth to you." He swung at me, a wild haymaker that telegraphed itself from across the county. I'd been in enough fights during my firefighting days to know how to duck and let momentum carry an attacker past me. David stumbled and nearly fell, his expensive shoes slipping on the wet pavement. "I'm calling the police," he panted. "Go ahead. Make sure you mention that you're the married executive who's been embezzling company funds to pay for hotel rooms with his employee." David's face went pale. He'd apparently forgotten about the evidence Lisa and I had compiled, too focused on his immediate outrage to consider the bigger picture. I got in my truck and drove away, leaving David standing next to his ruined car like a man watching his dreams dissolve in a puddle of chemical damage. The police didn't come that night, or the next day. David had apparently decided that drawing official attention to himself wasn't worth the satisfaction of pressing charges against me. But Natalie called. "What did you do to David's car?" "I have no idea what you're talking about." "Don't lie to me, Tom. This has gone too far." "Has it? Because from where I'm sitting, it feels like we're just getting started." The line went quiet for a long moment. When Natalie spoke again, her voice had changed. Gone was the angry wife demanding explanations. In her place was someone colder, more calculating. "You're going to regret this," she said. "Both of you are." She hung up before I could ask what she meant. The recording Monica had given me was just the beginning. Over the next week, she provided me with a treasure trove of evidence that painted a picture of Natalie I'd never seen before. Hours of audio from book club meetings where my wife had mocked not just me, but our daughter, her co-workers, and even the friends she was speaking to. "Zoe's been so clingy lately," Natalie's voice said through Monica's phone speaker. "She keeps asking questions about David and why I'm working so much. I swear, sometimes I think she's more mature than her father." Another recording. "The women in my department are so pathetic. They actually believe I care about their little problems." Jennifer in accounting spent 20 minutes crying about her mother's cancer diagnosis. I just nodded and made sympathetic noises while thinking about my lunch plans with David. The most damaging recording was Natalie describing her strategy for the divorce. "I'm going to take Tom for everything he's worth. The house, his pension, half his future earnings. He's too stupid and too nice to fight back effectively. His lawyer is some small-time family practice attorney who's never handled a case this complex. David's connected me with a shark who specializes in high-asset divorces. Tom won't know what hit him." Monica had been recording these conversations for months, initially as insurance against Natalie turning on her the way she'd turned on everyone else. Now she was ready to use them as weapons. "I can't stand by and watch her destroy you and Zoe," Monica explained during our second meeting. "She's not the person I thought she was." The opportunity for maximum impact came sooner than expected. Zoe's school was hosting its annual Fall Festival, a community event where parents gathered to celebrate the semester and discuss fundraising for various programs. Natalie had volunteered to help with the sound system, using her position to ensure she'd be seen as the involved, caring parent she'd never actually been. I arrived at the school early, while the setup crew was still arranging tables and testing equipment. The PA system was controlled from a small booth near the gymnasium entrance, staffed by parent volunteers who rotated shifts throughout the evening. I'd volunteered for the 7 o'clock slot, which would put me at the controls during the peak attendance period. Natalie arrived at 6:30, wearing a designer dress that probably cost more than most parents spent on their children's school supplies. She moved through the crowd like a politician, shaking hands and making small talk with other mothers who didn't know they were talking to someone who'd mocked them behind their backs for months. I watched her performance from across the room, marveling at her ability to project warmth and sincerity while planning to humiliate the people who trusted her. She was good at this, better than I'd given her credit for. No wonder I'd been fooled for so long. At 7 o'clock, I took my position in the sound booth. The previous volunteer, Mrs. Chen from the PTA, gave me a quick rundown of the equipment before heading off to enjoy the festival with her family. The system was simple: microphones for announcements, input jacks for music, and speakers throughout the school that could be controlled from the central panel. I waited until 7:30, when the crowd was at its largest and most engaged. Principal Morrison was introducing the new math curriculum, speaking into a wireless microphone that broadcast his voice throughout the building. Parents listened attentively, many taking notes about changes that would affect their children's education. When Morrison finished his presentation, I made my move. Instead of playing the scheduled background music, I connected Monica's phone to the sound system and started the first recording. Natalie's voice filled the gymnasium, clear and unmistakable. "These people are so boring. They actually think their children are special. Jennifer's kid is in Zoe's class and he's obviously learning disabled, but she keeps insisting he's just creative." I wanted to tell her that creativity doesn't explain why he can't read at grade level. The reaction was immediate. Conversations stopped. Parents looked around in confusion, trying to identify the source of the voice. Some recognized it immediately. Others needed a few seconds to place the familiar tone. I played the greatest hits. Natalie mocking Mrs. Patterson's weight, laughing about Mr. Rodriguez's accent, describing the school's fundraising efforts as a scam to make middle-class parents feel important. Each revelation hit the crowd like a physical blow, parents realizing that someone they'd trusted had been ridiculing them in private. The recording that broke the room was Natalie discussing Zoe. "I love my daughter, but she's turning into such a drama queen. Everything is a crisis with her. Her friend didn't invite her to a party. Her teacher gave her a B instead of an A. Her father won't buy her the expensive jeans she wants. I swear, sometimes I think boarding school would be good for both of us." Parents turned to stare at Natalie, who stood frozen near the refreshment table with a cup of punch halfway to her lips. Her face had gone completely white, her eyes wide with the kind of panic that comes from having your private thoughts broadcast to the people you'd been deceiving. I let the recordings play for 5 minutes before Principal Morrison figured out how to cut the power to the sound system. By then, the damage was complete. Parents were pulling out their phones, recording Natalie's reaction, and sharing the audio clips with friends who hadn't been there to witness the spectacle firsthand. Natalie tried to salvage the situation, approaching individual parents with explanations and apologies. "Those recordings are taken out of context," she insisted. "I was just venting, everyone does it. You know how much I care about this community." But the recordings had been too specific, too cruel, too revealing of genuine contempt. Parents who'd considered Natalie a friend now saw her as someone who'd been laughing at them behind their backs for months. The social network that had once supported her began to collapse in real time. I slipped out of the sound booth during the chaos and found Zoe standing near the exit, tears streaming down her face. She'd heard her mother's comments about boarding school, about being a drama queen, about being more mature than her father. "Dad," she whispered, "I'm here, sweetheart." "Is it true? Does Mom really think those things about me?" I knelt down to her level, looking into eyes that were too young to understand this kind of betrayal. "Your mother is going through a difficult time right now. She's making choices that hurt people, including you and me. I don't want to live with her anymore. You don't have to. We'll figure this out together." Zoe hugged me with the desperate strength of someone who just realized that one of the most important people in her life had been lying to her. Over her shoulder, I could see Natalie pushing through the crowd toward us, her face a mask of rage and humiliation. "Tom!" she shouted. "What did you do?" I stood up, keeping Zoe behind me. "I gave people the truth, something you've forgotten how to do. Those recordings were private conversations. So was our marriage, but that didn't stop you from sharing it with David." The crowd had formed a loose circle around us, parents watching the dissolution of a marriage play out in their children's school gymnasium. Some looked uncomfortable, others fascinated. A few were still recording with their phones. Natalie realized she was trapped, surrounded by people who'd heard her true opinions of them and their children. Her carefully constructed image as the perfect suburban mother had been shattered in 5 minutes of audio recordings. "This isn't over," she said quietly, her voice carrying a threat that made several parents step back. "You're right," I replied. "It's not." She left the festival alone, walking quickly to her car while parents whispered and pointed. I stayed for another hour, answering questions and accepting awkward condolences from people who were still processing what they'd heard. By the time Zoe and I got home, the story had already spread beyond the school community. Monica had shared the recordings on social media, tagging Natalie's coworkers and extended family. The comments were brutal. Friends expressing shock and betrayal, coworkers questioning her professionalism, family members demanding explanations. Natalie's carefully constructed social media presence, full of inspirational quotes and family photos, had become a comment battlefield where people shared their own stories of her private cruelty and public deception. The social inferno I'd started at the school festival was spreading beyond my control, consuming relationships and reputations with the efficiency of a wildfire. Natalie had spent years building a network of connections based on false friendship and manufactured charm. Now she was learning how quickly that network could turn against her when the truth came to light. The break-in happened on a Thursday night in December, during the first real snowstorm of the winter. I'd been expecting something like this for weeks, ever since Natalie's social humiliation at the school festival had made her desperate enough to take serious risks. Zoe was staying at her friend Emma's house for the night, a sleepover that had been planned for weeks, but felt providential given the circumstances. I was alone in the house, working on inspection reports in my home office, when I heard the first sound. A soft scraping at the back door, barely audible over the wind and snow. Someone was trying to pick the lock, working slowly and carefully to avoid making noise. I'd changed the locks after serving Natalie with divorce papers, but apparently she'd found another way to gain entry. I turned off the lights in my office and moved quietly to the kitchen window. Two figures stood on my back porch, hunched against the cold. Even in the darkness, I recognized Natalie's silhouette and David's expensive winter coat. They'd come together, probably figuring that two people could search the house more efficiently than one. They were looking for the evidence I'd compiled against them: financial records, recordings, emails, photographs, everything that could destroy what remained of their careers and reputations, everything that could send David to prison for embezzlement and make Natalie an accessory to his crimes. I could have called the police, should have called the police. A simple breaking and entering charge would have been easy to prove, especially with two witnesses standing in my kitchen holding flashlights and going through my filing cabinets. Instead, I activated the security system I'd installed the previous week. The house had been wired with motion sensors, cameras, and a smart home network that could be controlled from my phone. Every room had multiple recording devices, and the system was configured to automatically upload footage to a cloud server that Natalie and David couldn't access or destroy. More importantly, I'd rigged the house with what Pete had jokingly called Home Alone traps, non-lethal deterrents designed to humiliate rather than harm. Buckets of paint balanced over doorways, fishing lines stretched across hallways, and a sound system that could be activated remotely to create confusion and panic. I watched through the security cameras as Natalie and David moved through my house like amateur burglars, searching for documents they hoped would save their careers. They started in my office, going through desk drawers and filing cabinets with the desperate efficiency of people running out of time. "It has to be here somewhere," Natalie whispered, her voice picked up clearly by the hidden microphones. "Maybe he has a safe," David replied. "Check the bedroom." They moved upstairs, leaving wet footprints on the carpet and disturbing furniture with careless haste. I followed their progress on my phone, watching them violate the privacy of my home while searching for evidence of their own violations. When they reached the master bedroom, I triggered the first trap. A bucket of washable paint tipped over as David opened the closet door, covering him in bright blue latex that would stain his clothes and skin but cause no permanent damage. His scream of surprise and rage echoed through the house, followed by Natalie's panicked laughter. "What the hell was that?" she hissed. "He booby-trapped the house," David said, wiping paint from his eyes. "The bastard knew we were coming." They were right. I'd been planning this confrontation for weeks, preparing for the moment when their desperation would drive them to take risks that would expose them completely. Every trap, every camera, every recording device had been positioned to capture their criminal behavior in high definition. I triggered the second trap as they tried to leave the bedroom. Fishing lines stretched across the hallway at ankle height sent David tumbling down the stairs, his paint-covered body leaving blue smears on the white walls. Natalie tried to help him up, slipping on the wet floor and falling beside him in a tangle of limbs and profanity. The sound system activated next, filling the house with a recording of their own voices. The audio Monica had captured of them planning my financial destruction, mixed with excerpts from David's emails about embezzling company funds. Their own words echoed through the rooms, a soundtrack to their humiliation. I made my entrance through the front door, turning on all the lights and revealing the full extent of their situation. David sat on my living room floor covered in blue paint, his expensive clothes ruined and his dignity shattered. Natalie crouched beside him, her designer break-in outfit soaked with paint and melted snow. "Welcome to my home," I said. "Can I get you anything? Coffee? Towels? A criminal defense attorney?" "Tom, we can explain," Natalie began. "Can you? Because from where I'm standing, it looks like my estranged wife and her lover broke into my house to steal evidence of their crimes. But please, explain away." David struggled to his feet, paint dripping from his hair onto my carpet. "You can't prove anything." I held up my phone, showing them the security camera footage. "Actually, I can prove everything. Breaking and entering, attempted theft, conspiracy, and probably a few other charges I haven't thought of yet." The front door opened behind me, and Pete Morrison walked in with two uniformed police officers. I'd called them 20 minutes earlier, as soon as I'd confirmed that Natalie and David were inside the house. "Officers," I said, "I'd like to report a break-in." The next hour played out like a perfectly choreographed performance. The police took statements, collected evidence, and arrested both Natalie and David for breaking and entering. The security footage was clear and undeniable. Two people illegally entering my home and searching for documents to steal. More damaging than the criminal charges was the public humiliation. I'd live-streamed the entire confrontation to social media, broadcasting their arrest to hundreds of viewers who shared the footage with their own networks. By morning, videos of David covered in paint and Natalie crying in handcuffs had spread throughout the city. The local news picked up the story, describing it as a dramatic confrontation between estranged spouses that had exposed a web of adultery and embezzlement at a local tech company. TechFlow's stock price dropped 12% in pre-market trading as investors worried about the financial irregularities the scandal had revealed. David was fired before his arraignment, escorted from the building by security, while news cameras recorded his walk of shame. Natalie was placed on administrative leave, pending an investigation into her role in the embezzlement scheme, effectively ending her career in human resources. The divorce proceedings that had once seemed complicated became remarkably simple. Natalie's attorney, the shark she'd bragged about hiring, withdrew from the case after the break-in footage went viral. No reputable lawyer wanted to represent someone who'd been caught on camera committing felonies. I stood in my living room after the police had left, surveying the paint stains and overturned furniture. The house looked like a war zone, but it felt peaceful for the first time in months. The secrets were gone, the lies exposed, the pretense finally abandoned. My phone buzzed with a text from Zoe. "Dad, I saw the news. Are you okay?" I typed back, "I'm fine, sweetheart. Come home whenever you're ready." Outside, the snow continued to fall, covering the tracks Natalie and David had left in my yard. By morning, there would be no trace of their presence, except for the blue paint stains and the security footage that had already been downloaded by hundreds of viewers. I'd started this journey as a betrayed husband seeking answers. I was ending it as something else entirely, a man who'd learned that sometimes the best revenge isn't getting even, but simply letting people reveal who they really are when they think no one is watching. The house was quiet now, but it wasn't empty. It was full of truth, finally, and that made all the difference.